Moving day, a fresh start, or so I thought. I pulled into my new driveway, my police-issued black and white cruiser rumbling to a stop. After years of working late nights, patrolling crime-ridden streets, and dealing with the worst society had to offer, this place, the quiet cul-de-sac with neatly manicured lawns and white picket fences, felt like paradise. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. As I stepped out of my car, stretching from the long drive, I noticed a pair of eyes watching me. A woman, mid-50s, tightly curled blonde hair, a clipboard clutched in her arms like a lifeline, stood on the sidewalk. She had the expression of someone who had already made up their mind about me. I gave a polite nod. Afternoon. No response. Just a thin-lipped smile before she turned on her heel and strutted down the street. Odd. I shook it off and got to unloading boxes. My German shepherd, Duke, trotted beside me, sniffing the new territory. It was supposed to be a simple evening, a peaceful start to my new life. Then the first red flag arrived. By morning, an envelope was taped to my front door. Bright red ink. Block letters. HOA notice of violation. Frowning, I tore it open. Dear homeowner, our records indicate that you have parked a commercial or law enforcement vehicle in the driveway overnight. As per HOA regulations, this is strictly prohibited. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $200 per day. Please, rectify immediately. HOA President, Linda Cartwright. My grip tightened. Linda, the clipboard woman. I exhaled slowly, pressing my lips together. This was how they wanted to play? I'd faced criminals, corrupt officials, and hardened gang members, but something told me this battle would be different, and far from over. Hey, real quick! If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. I've dealt with plenty of power-hungry people in my career. Crooked politicians, self-important bureaucrats, even the occasional rogue officer who let the badge go to his head. But Linda Cartwright, she was a different breed entirely. I met her officially 3 days after the first violation notice. She didn't bother with introductions. You must be Mr. Dawson, she said, arms crossed, lips pursed in obvious disapproval. I assume you've read the HOA's regulations? I gave a slow nod, keeping my expression neutral. Assess, observe. Let them show their cards first. I have, I said. And I have a question. Her smile tightened. Oh? I pulled the violation notice from my pocket and unfolded it. Where exactly does it say that a police cruiser is considered a commercial vehicle? Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but she recovered fast. Page 12, Section 4B. Vehicles displaying commercial or government insignia are not permitted to park in residential driveways overnight. I held back a smirk. She hadn't expected me to check. That's interesting, I said, because I looked up county property records. Turns out, my driveway, like everyone else's, is private property. The HOA can regulate what's parked on the street, but not here. Her fingers curled around the clipboard in her hand. Well, Mr. Dawson, she said, voice clipped, rules exist for a reason. This is a community that values order. We don't want police vehicles disrupting the aesthetic. Disrupting the aesthetic. I let out a slow breath. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. Linda, I said carefully, I'm not looking to start trouble, but I also won't be bullied over nonsense. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she gave a saccharine smile. Oh, I'm sure we'll come to an understanding. That was the last civil conversation we had. By the end of the week, 3 more violation notices had been delivered to my door. Violation number 2. Trash cans must be placed at the curb no earlier than 6 a.m. on collection day. Yours were out at 5:45. Fine, $75. Violation number 3. Your lawn is 75 inches too high per HOA landscaping regulations. Fine, $150. Violation number 4. Unauthorized pet size. Dogs must be under 50 lbs. Fine, $100. Duke weighed 80 pounds. And he wasn't going anywhere. By the time I read the last one, I was laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was so blatantly targeted that it was almost impressive. Linda wasn't just trying to enforce rules. She wanted to break me. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I folded the notices neatly, set them aside, and picked up my phone. Time to do some digging. I've always believed that when something doesn't add up, it's because someone doesn't want it to, and the more I looked into this HOA, the clearer it became. Things weren't adding up. It started with the fines. I sat at my kitchen table one evening, flipping through the stack of violation notices Linda had so graciously left me. They all had one thing in common. The fines were steep. Too steep for minor infractions like early trash can placement or lawn height deviations. Curious, I pulled up the HOA financial reports. They were public records technically, but the HOA website had buried them under layers of useless documents, almost as if they didn't want anyone looking too closely. And when I finally found them, the numbers didn't make sense. The HOA collected way more in fines than in standard fees. In fact, violation fines made up almost 60% of their annual revenue. That wasn't normal. Most HOAs ran on a predictable budget, with fines being a last resort for actual issues. But here, it was a business model. That's when the real question hit me. Where was all that money going? The next morning, I decided to talk to some neighbors. If anyone else had noticed this pattern, maybe they'd be willing to speak up. But the moment I brought up the HOA, their expressions changed. I knocked on the door of the house 2 lots down. A man in his 60s, Mr. Callahan, opened it cautiously. "Hey, Mr. Callahan," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Got a second?" He hesitated. Sure, son. What's on your mind?" I glanced around, then lowered my voice. "It's about the HOA. Have you ever had issues with fines, strange rules?" His face paled. His eyes darted toward the street, as if someone might be listening. "Listen, I don't want any trouble." That set off alarms in my head. "Trouble?" I pressed. "I'm just asking a question." He licked his lips, glancing at the neatly trimmed hedges lining his yard. Then, in a whisper, he said, "They watch everything." I frowned. "Who does?" "The board," he muttered. "Linda, they target people. If you push back, they'll find a reason to fine you into the ground. Some folks have lost their homes over it." A cold weight settled in my gut. "They can't legally do that," I said. Callahan gave a humorless chuckle. "Sure, legally." Then he took a step back inside and started to close the door. "Just be careful, son." The door clicked shut. I walked back to my house, my mind racing. Something wasn't right. Fines making up most of the HOA's income, residents too afraid to talk, people losing their homes. Linda wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was running a racket, and I was going to prove it. Linda Cartwright thought she was untouchable. She had spent years ruling this neighborhood like a queen on a throne, hiding behind HOA bylaws and fear tactics. But she had made a mistake. A big one. She picked a fight with the wrong guy. I've spent my career building airtight cases, taking down criminals who thought they were above the law. Linda might not have worn a ski mask or carried a gun, but make no mistake, she was a criminal, and I was going to bring her down the same way I'd taken down countless others, by following the evidence. I started small. I set up a motion-activated dash cam in my squad car, pointed straight at my mailbox. If the HOA was going to keep delivering those bogus violations, I wanted to see who was doing it and when. The next morning, I had footage. 15 a.m. A dark-colored SUV pulled up to my house. A man in a black hoodie and gloves stepped out, slapped a violation notice onto my door, and disappeared into the night. Not exactly normal HOA procedure. I checked the notice. It was a fine for unauthorized modifications to the mailbox. I laughed. I hadn't touched the damn mailbox. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. The real issue wasn't just the harassment. It was the money. HOA fines aren't supposed to be a primary source of income. But in this neighborhood, they had become the backbone of the operation. I dug deeper into the financials. The HOA collected over $200,000 in fines last year alone. But where was that money going? Not into the neighborhood, that was for sure. The roads were cracked. The community pool was out of order. The playground equipment was rusting. But one thing was new. Linda Cartwright's brand new Lexus. I wasn't the only one who had noticed something was off. One evening, I got a knock at my door. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s. Dark hair, tense expression, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Can I help you?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, in a whisper, "My name's Emily. I know what you're doing, and I think I can help." I stepped aside, letting her in. She clutched a manila folder against her chest like it was a lifeline. "I used to be the HOA's treasurer," she said. Until I started asking the wrong questions. I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Linda didn't like that." She let out a dry laugh. "She made my life hell. Fined me for things that didn't even make sense. When I wouldn't back down, she got the board to vote me out." I leaned forward. "What's in the folder?" Emily slid it across the table. "Proof." I opened it and felt my pulse kick up a notch. It was all there. Bank statements, email chains, copies of forged financial records. Linda had been siphoning thousands from HOA accounts, disguising them as maintenance expenses. In reality, she was embezzling the money. I exhaled slowly. "Emily, this is exactly what I needed." She nodded. "I want her gone. Whatever it takes." I met her gaze. "Don't worry." I tapped the folder. "This is only the beginning." Linda had built her empire on fear. She was about to learn what happened when you messed with a cop who had nothing to lose. Linda Cartwright wasn't just corrupt, she was desperate. And when corrupt people get desperate, they get sloppy. I woke up one morning to find a thick, official-looking envelope taped to my front door. Unlike the usual HOA violation notices, this one had bold black lettering across the top. "Notice of foreclosure proceedings." For a split second, my stomach dropped. Then I saw the sender. Not a court, not a bank. Just the HOA. I exhaled slowly, flipping through the documents. According to them, I had racked up over $15,000 in unpaid fines, and if I didn't pay immediately, they would seize my home. I had dealt with criminals my entire career. But this was next-level fraud, and now they had just handed me the proof I needed. I sat at my kitchen table, picking apart every detail of the so-called foreclosure notice. Problem number 1. No legal firm was listed. Legitimate foreclosure proceedings require real attorneys. Linda, apparently, thought she could scare me without one. Problem number 2. The signature. The bottom of the document had a scrawled signature. "Linda Cartwright, HOA President." I chuckled. Linda wasn't a lawyer. She had no legal authority to foreclose on anything. Problem 3. The biggest mistake of all? The fine breakdown. They had gotten greedy. Most HOAs keep fines within a few $100s at a time. But these numbers? Completely arbitrary. One line read, "Failure to comply with community standards, $3,500. For what? Breathing too loudly? Another, non-conforming property use, $5,000. What the hell did that even mean? The whole thing reeked of fraud, and now I had evidence of intent. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Linda was actively trying to steal property from homeowners. And that was a crime. I called Emily, my inside source, and she showed up at my house within the hour. The moment she saw the letter, her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They actually went through with it." I narrowed my eyes. "You knew about this?" She nodded, looking sick to her stomach. "Linda, she's been trying to push people out for months, but I didn't think she'd actually forge a foreclosure notice. Has this worked on anyone else?" I asked, voice low. Emily swallowed hard. "A couple, mostly older folks, people who didn't have the means to fight back." I clenched my jaw. "And where did their houses go?" She hesitated. "Then Linda bought them." A slow, burning anger crept up my spine. Linda had been running a real estate scam right under everyone's nose. She would fine people into oblivion, scare them into surrendering their homes, and then buy the properties herself, dirt cheap. It was fraud, it was extortion, and it was criminal. I grabbed my phone. "Who are you calling?" Emily asked. I met her gaze. "The state attorney's office." Linda was about to learn what a real legal notice looked like. Linda Cartwright had spent years weaponizing fear against this neighborhood. But fear only works when people don't fight back. And now, she had picked the wrong fight. By noon the next day, I had filed a formal complaint with the state attorney's office and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, SHUD. HOA fraud wasn't just a civil matter, it was a serious crime. Bank fraud, wire fraud, intent to defraud homeowners, and thanks to Emily's documents and the fake foreclosure notice Linda had so generously provided, I had everything I needed. The moment the complaint was processed, things started moving fast. Within 48 hours, a state investigator reached out for a statement. The HOA board members started getting calls from officials. And Linda? She went silent. No more violation notices. No more warnings. Nothing. That's when I knew. She was scrambling. I wasn't the only one watching. Word started spreading around the neighborhood. The same people who had once been too afraid to speak up were now asking questions. How long has the HOA been pulling this scam? What happened to the people? Who lost their homes? And the best question of all, what else has Linda been hiding? Then, a notice appeared in everyone's mailboxes. Mandatory HOA. Meeting. Attendance required. The timing was too perfect. Linda must have thought she could control the narrative before the investigators got too deep. Too bad for her. I was coming prepared. The HOA meetings were usually held in the community clubhouse, a fancy name for an outdated room with plastic chairs and bad coffee. But tonight the room was packed. I had never seen so many people show up. Even the residents who normally kept their heads down were here, whispering amongst themselves. People were angry, suspicious, ready for answers. Linda sat at the front, flanked by two other board members. She looked composed, but her eyes gave her away. She was nervous. "Let's call this meeting to order," she said, voice tight. I leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. I wasn't going to speak, not yet. I wanted to see her dig her own grave first. "As many of you know," Linda began, forcing a smile, "there has been some confusion regarding HOA policies." A scoff came from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Confusion? Try theft." Linda's eyes flickered, but she ignored it. "Rest assured, the HOA is acting in the best interests of the community." I let her ramble for another minute before stepping forward. "Linda," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "why don't you tell everyone how many homes the HOA has seized in the past 5 years?" Dead silence. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I pulled a thick folder from my bag and let it drop onto the table. Loud, heavy, undeniable. "These are financial records," I said, "showing exactly how much money has been collected from fines, and where it's gone." Linda's face paled. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I flipped open the folder, reading aloud. "In the last 5 years, the HOA has collected over $800,000 in fines. Yet somehow, basic maintenance projects have been delayed. The pool is unusable. The playground hasn't been updated in years. So I have to ask, where did the money go?" I locked eyes with her. "Or should I say, whose bank account did it end up in?" The room erupted. Linda shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. These are baseless accusations." "Are they?" I interrupted. "Because I have bank records, and I have emails." I turned to the crowd. "And for those of you who received foreclosure threats, the HOA has no legal authority to seize homes. None. Every notice you got was a lie." Gasps, more whispers. Someone yelled, "You stole from us!" Linda's hand shook. She turned to the board members beside her, but they were already distancing themselves. That's when I saw it. Panic. She knew. It was over. I've seen criminals break in interrogation rooms. Some crack under pressure, confessing everything in a desperate bid for leniency. Others deny, lie, clawing at whatever shred of control they think they have left. Linda Cartwright was the second type. But the thing about people like her, they always think they're untouchable until the walls close in. And tonight, the walls were closing in fast. "Lies," Linda spat, her face flushed red. "This is nothing but slander. None of this is true." I arched an eyebrow. "So you're saying these financial records—" I tapped the thick stack of papers in front of me. "Are fake? The ones that show thousands of dollars in maintenance expenses funneled into your private account?" Silence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One resident, an elderly man near the front, stood up. "My sister lost her home because of your fake fines," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "You ruined people's lives, Linda." A woman followed. "We paid thousands in fees, and you used it to buy yourself a new car." More voices joined. Anger rising. Years of resentment boiling over. Linda's eyes darted from side to side, looking for support. But her own board members wouldn't even meet her gaze. She was alone. And she knew it. "This meeting is over," she snapped, grabbing her folder. "None of this is legally binding. I won't stand here and listen to—" "Actually," I cut in, "it is legally binding." She froze. I held up a thick manila envelope. The state attorney's office received a copy of everything. Embezzlement, fraudulent foreclosures, wire fraud. "I'm guessing investigators will be reaching out to you soon." Her breath hitched. "And, in case you're thinking of running," I added, "they already flagged your accounts. You're not going anywhere." Linda staggered back, gripping the table like the floor had just disappeared beneath her. Then the real kicker, one of the board members, a wiry man with glasses, suddenly stood. I motioned to remove Linda Cartwright as HOA president immediately. He announced. The entire room exploded. "Seconded!" someone yelled. "All in favor?" Hands shot up. Dozens of them. Linda let out a strangled sound, looking around like a drowning woman searching for a lifeline. But there wasn't one. Her reign was over. By the next morning, Linda resigned in disgrace. Investigators froze her assets, launched an official probe into misappropriated funds, and within weeks the HOA board was completely replaced. For the first time in years, the neighborhood wasn't ruled by fear. And me? I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air, no violation notices taped to my door. Linda had tried to play dirty, but she forgot one thing. Some of us don't back down. For the first time since moving into this neighborhood, I woke up to silence. No violation notices taped to my door, no neighbors whispering in fear, no HOA spies circling the block, looking for their next victim. Linda Cartwright was gone, and the reign of fear she built, it crumbled with her. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from Linda's corruption spread like wildfire. Investigators dug deep into the HOA's financial records, uncovering years of fraud, forged documents, and embezzlement. Every shady fine, every foreclosure scam, every dollar she had stolen, it was all laid out in black and white. The news hit local headlines. HOA president accused of fraud, facing criminal charges. The remaining board members? They didn't stick around for long. One by one, they resigned, hoping to avoid legal trouble. But it was too late. Some were complicit in Linda's schemes, and they knew it. By the time the state finished its investigation, Linda and 3 other board members were charged with fraud, wire theft, and conspiracy. Some took plea deals. Linda didn't get that luxury. She had too much blood on her hands. With the corrupt leadership wiped out, the community had a choice: dissolve the HOA entirely, or rebuild it the right way. Most people wanted it gone. No more rules, no more fines, no more power trips. But others argued that an HOA, if done fairly, could actually be a benefit. So we compromised. The new HOA board was elected by the residents. No more secret meetings, no more unchecked power. New rules were put in place. No fines without fair warnings and proof. No rule changes without community approval. No personal financial gain for board members. Fair, transparent, honest. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to live in their own homes. One evening, as I sat on my front porch with Duke at my feet, Emily walked by. She stopped at the bottom of my steps, a small smile on her face. "You did it," she said. "You actually took her down." I shrugged. "We did it. You gave me the evidence." She shook her head. "Maybe, but you had the guts to stand up when no one else could." I glanced around. The street looked different now. Kids played without their parents, anxiously watching over their shoulders. Neighbors talked, laughed, planned backyard barbecues, things they wouldn't have dared to do before. This place had felt like a prison when I moved in. Now, it actually felt like a community. I looked back at Emily. "You staying?" She hesitated. Then she smiled. "Yeah, I think I will." She turned to leave but paused. "Hey, Dawson?" "Yeah," she smirked. "You ever think about running for HOA president?" I laughed, shaking my head. Not a chance. I was done fighting battles. This time I had already won. And just like that, the neighborhood was finally free. No more corruption, no more fear, just peace. And damn, it felt good. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. Don't forget to tap the bell icon to stay updated. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support means the world.